tour around the globe of brief updates, what's happening around different regions around the world. Couple of technical elements to have in mind. First one, because of the technical setup that we are making here and experimenting a little bit, we encourage you to stay on this speaker view in Zoom, because it will be maybe a nicer view for all of you. Secondly, the chat will be, and we hopefully be very active. Feel free to use the chat to the maximum potential. My colleague Sonia Su is there, who will be a moderator of the chat. She'll try to nudge you and provoke you a little bit. She will also feed all of your comments and questions and inputs from the chat into our discussion today. Behind the preparations for today's meeting and also taking part in parts of these meetings are my colleagues from Diplo, Andriana, Stephanie, Katarina, Marco will be in Geneva, Jovan will probably jump in at some point, and many, many others in behind the scenes that you can see. And it's my particular pleasure to welcome a distinguished guest for this meeting, for this briefing. It's Ambassador Jurg Lauber, who's well, now the former chair of the UN open-ended working group related to cybersecurity, cyber stability, as you wish. We'll get back to him and this topic in just a minute. And as I mentioned, we are starting with the trends of the month. So firstly, we'll cover the 3 trends of the month. Briefly, they are cyber diplomacy negotiations, cybersecurity negotiations. There is a sort of a highlight. The second one is tech sovereignty. So it's again back on the table, how the states and also the companies are dealing with sovereignty online. And the third, which has been buzzing around the news for quite some time, is the vaccine digital passports. And generally, it is a year after we started with the lockdowns around the world and the COVID started. So it would be interesting to review some of the trends related to COVID-19 technology or technology for combating that. Let us move to the first trend, which is related to cybersecurity negotiations. And before introducing our guest and passing the floor to him, I'll just briefly give a broader context. The main development of the month certainly is the final report, which was adopted by United Nations, or the states of the United Nations, with a consensus related to cybersecurity, to global cybersecurity within the open-ended working group of the United Nations. We'll hear a little bit about that very soon, but it's not only about this important development. We have been in Diplo following the open-ended working group negotiations and generally the group of governmental experts and all these negotiations about global cybersecurity for now years already. And we underline this cyber diplomacy in action as a trend, because this is not the only thing that happened this month. We've also seen the continuation of the discussion within the OSCE, the European group of countries, which includes also US and Russia as members, follow-up discussions on implementation of confidence building measures. And there is a feeling within that group that the success of the open-ended working group, the positive atmosphere, in spite of all the global tensions, somehow spill over to the OSCE negotiations, and we hope that this positive energy will spill over to other negotiations. At the same time, we have seen the cooperation between the US, Australia, Japan, and India, the Quad. We'll hear a little bit more about that afterwards, including on establishing a sort of a special working group on new technologies and so on. In the meantime, we also have the Paris Call for Stability of Cyberspace, which is launching its working groups. So things are moving. But let's be honest, this all works against a sort of a backdrop of increased risks and tensions. We've been reporting on SolarWinds in the previous months. This month, we have also seen the exploitation of the vulnerability, a very dangerous one, in the Microsoft Exchange servers around the world, again, attributed to some of the countries. And we also read about possible intention of the US to strike back against Russia in sort of a retaliation to the SolarWinds attack. So things are also very tense at the same time. And I'll stop there. I'll get back to the positive side and the open-ended working group and the results. And again, it's my pleasure to welcome Ambassador Jurg Lauber. Ambassador was the chair of the open-ended working group. Now, Ambassador, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for your time today. Among the people following the IG briefing are not necessarily only the people that have been following in details these cybersecurity negotiations. So I'll start with a simple question. What happened and why is that relevant for all of us? And then we'll certainly have more questions for you. Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Vladimir. Thank you, DIPLO Foundation, for having me. It seems like a simple question, but it took 2 years. So it's maybe, if I may, try to summarize what happened in a few minutes. Also, maybe to recall where it came from. Cybersecurity is a term that is still used in many contexts. Our mandate came out of the first committee, so really hardcore security, the use of ICT in international, the impact of ICTs on international peace and security. The mandate was formulated in late 2018. You remember there were 2 parallel processes. Another GGE, group of governmental experts, number 6. We've had 5 before. And then for the first time, an open-ended working group, open-ended meaning every member state of the end observer of the United Nations had access to the work of this group. The mandate of two processes was very similar. It concerned especially 5 items: norms of responsible behavior of states in cyberspace. Number 2, international law, the question of the applicability of international law. Number 3, confidence building measures. Number 4, capacity building. And number 5, and that was exclusive to our group, regular institutional dialogue. You also know that we didn't start from zero, from scratch. In fact, the previous GGEs had built up a whole compendium, a framework, an acquis of norms, or a normative acquis concerning the issue, the impact of ICTs in peace and security, consisting of a common understanding of the applicability of international law, of a set of 11 norms for responsible state behavior, and also a common understanding on the importance of confidence building measures. Now, our job was really to look at this now together with all the member states to discuss what has been done before, to come up with maybe new findings and, if possible, recommendations, and to do all of this by consensus. So we needed the approval of all the member states who participated. Maybe a few words on the challenges we faced, and then a few words on the results we came up with. Some of the challenges you mentioned, the overall environment for discussions on cyber technology is, on the one hand, getting more and more excited. Everybody realizes how important this is, not least in the context of international peace and security. But it's also becoming more complicated in the sense that the geopolitical environment is not great. Remember, we started, as I said, 2 processes parallel. We had votes in the General Assembly, so there was no consensus on this mandate. And still we needed to bring everybody on board. Many of the member states participating in our open-ended working group did so for the first time on this issue in an institutionalized way. The previous groups of government experts were usually very limited to smaller numbers. I think they started out with 15. The latest one had 25 members. So now having so many more around the table made a real difference. And then, of course, the impact of COVID. Halfway through the work of the group, we had to switch from physical meetings like everybody else, but from physical meetings to virtual consultations. And the whole process was delayed. And the way we met actually 2 weeks ago now in New York was by itself quite something. You know, we have a mix between hybrid and virtual meetings. A year ago, or actually even before the meeting, I was very doubtful that this would work. But, you know, we all made a lot of progress. We got used to new instruments, to new platforms, and we actually came up with the result. So what's the outcome? I think the outcome is significant in terms of substance but also in terms of what kind of process we were able to construct and to go through. Substance-wise, on first sight, it may not seem that much. The most essential, maybe the most important outcome was that we were able to reconfirm that our key I mentioned that had been established by the GGs in the past, but now in this much broader framework of all member states. And so we have, again, a reconfirmation of the applicability of existing international law. We had a reconfirmation of these 11 norms, and we have a reconfirmation of the importance of CBMs. And we also, and I come back to that, we're talking a lot about technical cooperation, capacity building. In addition to the reconfirmation of what had been there before, we added some new elements. There was a new, let's say, actualized understanding of the existing threat framework, what's out there in terms of development, cyber technology being a threat or possible or potential threat to international peace and security. In particular, the reference to attacks against healthcare, medical facilities that many countries experienced during the COVID was mentioned. We had a reference into the potential devastating humanitarian consequences of cyber attacks, which is an indirect confirmation of the importance of international humanitarian law. These are new elements we were able to come together on in addition to the acquis. There's a reference in the report on a survey. There was an Australian-Mexican proposal to serve for national surveys on the implementation of international law, because in the discussion, many delegations made the point that implementation of existing international law is of key importance. We have several references in the report on the importance of including stakeholders. And I come back to that when I speak about the process. Again, the report underlines the importance of confidence building measures. In this context, it also contains some very specific proposals how to make better use of models that worked in the past. The report, for instance, suggests the creation of national focal points, national points of contacts that would make it easier to exchange information, experience among member states about what kind of confidence building measures work. And there is a lot of talk, and that's probably the strongest part in the report, about capacity building, realizing that making national cyber capacities stronger, protect them better against attacks is probably, from a prevention point of view, the best, most important measure. In terms of regular institutional dialogue, the report makes reference to the new open-ended working group. The General Assembly of the UN already decided to continue the open-ended working group format for another 5 years. Plus, it also makes reference to a French-Brazilian proposal for a program of action. So again, a reconfirmation what has been discussed and presented by the smaller group of experts in a much wider framework, plus important additional elements. The report, by the way, has two parts. It has a substantial reporting part where there is consensus, and it has a chair summary where there are elements, proposals made by member states throughout the discussions on which there was no consensus, but which probably will be has been lost from these very substantial discussions we had over 2 years. Let me say one word on the process, then I'll stop here. The process, I think, by itself was important because, as I mentioned at the beginning, it was a sort of an opportunity for many delegations to catch up, a learning experience for many delegations, what has been done in the past. what has been developed by these groups of governmental experts, what are the current reflections, discussions, challenges that member states face this exchange. I really tried to make this process as inclusive and as transparent as possible, and these discussions took place. And we really tried also to open it. You all know that, especially in the area of peace and security, participation of non-governmental stakeholders is often very sensitive. But I think we succeeded in making some progress there, having dedicated meetings, exchanges, but also keeping the rest of the process very transparent, not least through the website of the open-ended working group, where at any moment you could find any positions and contributions and statements of member states. So I think it's an important success. It's the first time since 2015 that member states of the UN were able to agree on something related to the issue of impact of ICTs on peace and security. And I really hope it will turn out to be also an accelerator, catalyst for future discussions, because as you know better than I do, that challenges, the risks are enormous, and we need to address it. We need to address it together. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think you explained quite well why many consider this as a landmark. Not only it is the first one as a consensus after 6 years, it is reconfirming the previous agreements, but it's also adding layers of even if small bits of improvements. I think one of the improvements that you also mentioned is actually this not only inclusiveness of all the states, so going beyond the closed club that the GG usually is, which has its merits as well, but extending to other stakeholders, which I bet was quite a challenge for you to handle with all the stakeholders and states. I have one question I'll ask everyone to, in the meantime, use the chat to the maximum. I'll come back to Sonia with a summary and maybe questions from the chat in a minute, but I do want to use an opportunity to ask you one follow-up question that I know many people that are not necessarily involved in negotiations and following that closely is of interest. It is, what is the meaning, what is the effect of this as a piece of paper, as some would say? So yeah, we have another sort of agreements, but how do we go ahead from that? How do we go towards implementation, or what is the risk of this staying as just a piece of paper, and how do we go ahead? Again,
I like to believe actually that this raised awareness of the issue in many quarters. Many delegations who had not been involved in the previous discussions took this as an opportunity to participate, to learn also what's out there, but also states then asking themselves, is our setup sufficient, or do we have the right experts for this? Do we have the right policies internally? Do we have the right protection for our cyber technology infrastructure? And as often in a UN context, especially thanks to the stakeholders, you will find people coming up with proposals, with solutions. There's a lot of thinking. You're the best example. Chip is really now you're that sort of catalyst I was talking about. Organizing meetings, bringing new stakeholders together, taking note of what has been discussed among member states, identifying concerns of member states, but then coming forward with solution, bringing academia into play, bringing the private sector into play. And I very much, over the 2 years, I believe I saw an increase of noise around the issue, which leads to an increase of solution, which leads hopefully also to an increase of resources available to go after this solution and build up on the consensus and on some of the proposals that you will find in our report.
Thank you. Well, again, an important note that the implementation shouldn't stay only on states. There are many other actors that can help a lot. We hope that the states will do their part as well. Let me move on to Sonia. So Sonia was following the chat. Sonia, I guess this topic is quite interesting for everyone. I don't know whether there were some interesting inputs and questions, Sonia.
There definitely is interesting questions and inputs, and most of them are focusing on how exactly the inclusive process work in the working groups work, especially considering how it's one of the first times that other non-governmental stakeholders were included. So how exactly did that process work, and what were the challenges and lessons learned? And also the consensus on this final report, it reaffirms the importance of existing international guidelines and laws. So does this mean there's no need for a new digital convention? Would this be how you would interpret it? And finally, do you think, is there a potential to develop a new and more detailed norms to implement the existing norms on responsible state behavior in cyberspace?
Ambassador, quite some questions. I'll leave it to you. Take your time. We still have time. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have a few more minutes. Yeah. On inclusivity, there were two aspects to that. First of all, I tried when I was still in New York, this started when I was still in New York, to reach out to member states and groups of member states that were traditionally not so much involved in the previous expert groups, in the previous processes. And so I made an active effort to go reach out to them, motivate them to participate in our meetings. And in fact, in the first two meetings, the first two sessions of the working group out of three, they took place in New York in a traditional physical form before COVID hit. And we didn't have 193 delegations in the room, but we maybe have had half or probably more than half, because we had more than 70 delegations taking the floor, which is quite a lot, including group statements from like CARICOM, from Pacific Island Forum, etc. So that's one track, the member states. And I think we succeeded really in bringing them on board. Second was the non-governmental stakeholders. And there we were lucky that in the mandate, we already had the possibility to have what we call an intersessional informal stakeholders meeting, which took place in December 2019 in New York, which was an excellent event. And I can say so because I was only marginally involved. It was organized with a lot of help from the Secretariat, who did an excellent work selecting participants from academia, civil society, and the private sector. So from these three pillars, but also from across the world. So you had African companies, Asian universities, really an excellent mix. And what I've rarely seen in the UN context, you already also have the member states following actively. So an excellent event. Beyond that, as I said, we always try to find opportunities to exchange with the stakeholders. Not all the member states are too keen about that, but I made myself available to stakeholder events. I encouraged the dialogue between stakeholders and member states. I think we made progress. More needs to be done. I'm convinced, for instance, that the private sector needs to be involved even better, because we all know the technology we are talking about is up to 90% of that technology comes from the private sector. So I don't see sustainable, really good solutions to technical issues without them being involved. Is the need for a new convention? You know, this discussion is a very, very heated one, or a very intense one. There are those who say, no, we need to, in what we have now, especially in terms of legally binding international law, is sufficient. We just need to be better at implementing it, thinking about what it means implementing it in the cyber area. And then there are those who say, no, we need more specific norms. We need to look at this anew. Others then again say, when we talk about, when we open the existing norms, we are in danger of weakening it. This is a discussion that's ongoing. I think it should go on. We have to listen to the arguments out there. We, as Swiss ambassador, if I may change the hat for a moment, we at this point don't necessarily believe in the need for new conventions. We think we need to preserve the standards and make sure that they're being implemented in cyberspace. On non-binding norms, there is discussions about new norms again. Maybe there, I think there is a bit more flexibility, or a bit more need in the practical realm to find norms for, to devise norms for responsible behavior. But again, especially I think implementation. Implementation is probably the most urgent issue.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'll just briefly get back to Sonia, just in case there is anything else coming from the chat. Sonia.
Thank you, Vlad. Yes, there is actually. Whether the report and the consensus achievement will impact the other upcoming and forthcoming cybercrime negotiations, such as the UNODC ad hoc committee on cybercrime.
That's a very interesting question. I noticed that in the final document there was a sort of a clear cover that the discussion shouldn't go into other areas. There shouldn't be duplication, but some bits about explicit mentioning of topics was left out at the end. Any thoughts, Ambassador?
Yeah, I would hope that colleagues who go into those negotiations also take a look at what we have done and come up with. As I said in the beginning, we need to look at what the actual mandates are, where we are coming from, and we need to be careful not to confuse too much how we use terms. At the same time, it's also clear that there's a lot of gray zones in between. You know, if you have a criminal outfit using cyber technology, sooner or later you may go into peace and security issues. If you look at the reality today, it's not always so clear cut. So I think what we need to do is we need to look at the mandate and try to stick to that, but we can't be blind. We can't ignore what's happening left and right of us in related areas.
And we hope that the energy that came out of the open-ended working group would definitely help the others. I'll use the last minute for your other hat, which I think is important, the hat of Switzerland. First of all, I mean, I think this is a great achievement for Switzerland per se, and of course, certainly for you as a chair. But you are also a very interesting example, or a useful example in Switzerland of a very active state, not only in this chairing and mediation, but also in digital foreign policy, in working with other stakeholders. What sort of a tip you might give, or I don't know, even an advice to other states? What should be the main steps the states should be taking in future in this regards?
I feel that we need to work together, really. That's the key. I mean, we need on a national level, we need to probably make assessments on where we are development-wise, how safe is our infrastructure, what do we need to protect it better. But then very quickly, these things, as many other issues, are transported. They can't be looked at the national level only. So I think we need to reach out to others and exchange experiences, look at for common solutions. And there, I really want to take my hat as a Swiss ambassador in Geneva in particular. I think in Geneva, what we've seen, and you know this better than I do, what we've seen developing over the last few years is a very rich biotope of organizations, state-driven, completely private, civil society, who are looking into this matter. And the more we work together with them, the more we sit together and look at what's happening. Where are solutions being developed? Where do we need cooperation? Where do we need national contributions? I think that's the way to go about this.
Excellent closing, I would say. Well, we could spend another 2 hours discussing this, and I'm sure we will have more opportunities. Thank you again for joining us today. Half an hour has flown away, and I hope we'll have another opportunity. And congratulations again for the great success.
Always a pleasure. Can I just say one thing? This is, it's never one person. It's first of all, I had a fantastic team. Many of you know Lucas from their own mission here. We had awesome support from UNIDIR here in Geneva, great work with the Secretariat in New York. And then, of course, many delegations. I think that was the key, was that so many delegations, so many member countries realized we need to make progress. We need to come together on something. This is such an important and urgent issue. That was, in the end, decisive. Plus, again, support from stakeholders. Like yourself, coming up with ideas. So it's a huge collective effort. Thank you very much.
And that is the cyber diplomacy in action. Many thanks again for joining us today. I remind all of you that when it comes to a Diplos part, we've been following this. And if you want to learn more about the success of the Open ND Working Group, the process and so on, you can go to Digital Watch, read all the reports from all of the meetings of the Open ND Working Group, which was transparent. You can look at the blogs which analyze the end process and the participation of states, as well as the final document and what it brought and what it maybe didn't. And finally, we are launching the new online course on cybersecurity diplomacy. It's fresh, new from Diplos e-learning press in a way. So feel free to visit and join us for the next course. And let's go on to other two trends, a little bit more briefly than this one, but not least of importance. The second one is tech sovereignty. And we keep coming back to this from meeting to meeting in a way. But I'll pass the floor to my colleague, Stephanie, who will lead us through this trend of the month. Stephanie, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Vlad. Regarding importance, I'm not so sure, because the good news that we had regarding what Ambassador Lauber had just described, I think that really tops it off during March. But as you described, we'll move on to tech sovereignty as a second trend that we have identified. And this is specifically related to several developments that we have seen by some of the global tech leaders. So based on what we saw in March, the two countries or regions who are currently the most ambitious in becoming tech leaders in different areas are, and no surprise here, the EU and China. We're looking only at what happened in March. So this is our assessment of the month. For both of them, being a leader, again, no surprise, especially for one of them, being a leader also means being more self-reliant. So less reliant on other countries, on other regions. And so let's see what happened with each of them. So I'll start with the EU. The EU's Digital Compass, it's called. It's a new plan to reach specific targets. And the targets are related to skills, infrastructure, the digitalization of businesses, and the digitalization of public services. So 4 broad groups there with a set of targets for each one. What I found most interesting there is the fact that the campus will also have a governance framework. So it will be a sort of a monitoring system, which will work in the way of traffic lights. So you'll have different colors to show how the EU countries are staying on track. So if an EU country is not on track on any of the targets, traffic lights will blink and it will signal to that country that it needs to get back on track. So this governance system is governance framework is quite interesting. So that's the EU. So once again, specific targets which it wants to reach ASAP. Moving to China, it launched its next five-year plan with a strong focus on technology. The five-year plan is not exclusively on technology, but is the country's priorities. But technology features a lot, and no surprise there, China reiterated its ambitions for frontier technology. So it lists some technology areas. Some of them fall squarely within what we understand by digital policy. Others are at the periphery. And what is interesting in China's plan, as I said, is that the country reiterates again the aim of becoming self-sufficient. By self-sufficient here, it is alluding mostly to its reliance primarily for the issue of semiconductors, in which it gets from the US. We'll continue to follow how these plans will be implemented and how other countries will react, and that's mostly the US. So what the US has in store, how is the new Biden administration tackling digital policy, and where is the race on different technological areas, where is it at? Back to you, Vlado.
Thank you, Stephanie. Well, I think this will definitely be a longer term trend. It has been already in tracking how particularly US and China and EU in between them are managing these issues. I'll turn to Sonia to see if there are any questions, comments in the chat related to particularly this subject. Sonia.
Right now, not about particularly this subject. Thanks.
Thank you, Sonia. And one suggestion for all of you in the chat might be, because we have focused particularly here, and most developments come from the US, China, maybe Russia, EU, but there are not that many developments related to tech sovereignty aspects clearly in developing countries. It will be quite interesting to hear from you what is the buzz in your region around the world when it comes to state sovereignty in the digital space. Stephanie, thank you. We'll definitely follow on this, and we will cover that in the Digital Watch newsletter as well. So there'll be much more opportunity to discuss this. Thanks again for joining, Stephanie. And we're moving to the third trend of the month, which is related to, well, COVID-19. We couldn't miss that. It has been a year since we are in a lockdown. Things are improving slightly around the world with vaccines, but things are not probably as fast as we would hope. One of the recent elements of that is the possible introduction of digital passports. And it's probably a good time to reflect on that and where are we when it comes to technology that is helpful for combating COVID-19. I will invite my colleague Katarina, who has been following on COVID technology in the past, and again to briefly reflect on that. Katarina.
Thank you, Vlada. Yes, we've been observing the interplay between tech and COVID-19 ever since the pandemic broke out. And indeed, technology has played a great role in tackling the pandemic. A number of tech companies and medical and scientific institutions worldwide have put their faith, particularly in AI, in an attempt to reduce the spread of COVID-19. AI has, for instance, also joined the quest for a vaccine. Other uses of technologies in tackling the impact of the pandemic include, for instance, the contact tracing apps, which gained in prominence last year. On the other hand, the impact of COVID-19 on technology has equally proved significant. One of the most obvious trends following the outbreak is the surge in teleworking and the rise in e-commerce. On the negative side, misinformation is rampant, and we have also witnessed the growth in online acts of hate speech, urging major tech companies to develop various tools to address false claims and virus-related conspiracy theories. But as you mentioned, nowadays a new trend is emerging and is related to the rise of vaccine passports. Now that vaccines have been developed, the digital health passports are being considered by some as an important tool to help countries lift international travel bans. For instance, the European Commission proposed to create a digital green certificate to facilitate safe movement inside the EU during the pandemic, and the certificate will be proof that a person has either been vaccinated against COVID-19 or received a negative test or even recovered from COVID-19. And similar initiatives have been launched at the country level too. According to Estonian Ministry of Social Affairs, for instance, the country will have a digital vaccine certificate ready by April. And Denmark also plans to use its Corona Pass vaccine passport domestically from Easter on. Israel, on the other hand, has already put in place such a thing. Their passport is called a Green Pass, and it is actually available to anyone who has either been vaccinated or has recovered from COVID-19, and their citizens use it to access facilities such as hotels, gyms, or theaters. Then on the international level, IATA has developed a travel pass app, and international airlines began trialing a new digital passport embedded with vaccination information. But then challenges arises, of course, and although essential, privacy and data protection are not the only challenges associated with digital health passports. Other implications for other include the false sense of security, because vaccination does not automatically imply immunity. Then relying exclusively on immunity passports can also lead to discriminations, because some travelers cannot be vaccinated for many health-related reasons. And the passports can also further deepen the existing inequalities, given that a lot of countries still do not have sufficient access to vaccines, and that more than 3.6 billion people worldwide cannot access the internet. And therefore, for many people, paper passes will still remain essential. Well, that will be all from my end for now. Vlada, over to you.
Thank you, Kat. There are many questions we can ask, certainly. I have just one quick reflection from your side. It might be too early to respond to the question, but we certainly have to start thinking about it. Are there any sort of standards related to, or coming at least emerging, related to digital passports?
Well, there are still no standards in place regarding the key elements of a certificate, or even the digitalization of the certificate. But as you said, to succeed internationally, the system really needs to be based on widely accepted standards. And to this end, for instance, the EU has recently published guidelines on verifiable vaccination certificates, which is actually aimed at preparing member states for the interoperability between vaccination certificates. Also, at the country level, the UK has proposed 12 criteria that should be satisfied by a COVID-19 vaccine passport, and their criteria state that the passport should be internationally standardized, and that it should be based on a platform of interoperable technologies. So there are some baby steps in this direction, but we will see how the whole situation will unfold.
Thank you so much, Katarina. We'll definitely be following that. I want to wrap up this part on the trends with all the comments from the chat. So I'm passing the floor to Sonia. Sonia, not necessarily only about this topic. If there's anything previous topics are of interest, you can raise, and I'll pass the floor to Jovan to give a bit of a zoom out before we move to what's coming in April. Sonia.
So there's been an interesting debate in the chat about incorporating trade. Well, okay, Richard Hill has commented on how the ambassador has stated that there is no need for new treaty level changes. But then why is Switzerland, I'm very sorry right now, then why is Switzerland still trying to incorporate cybersecurity related aspects into trade negotiations? And this has evolved into quite an interesting debate, and I think everyone should look at in the chat. And then there was also questions and comments about Katarina's subject. And the main question is, why can't we continue using paper passports, and why do we need digitalized passports? And also a comment again from Richard Hill about the US President Biden announcing how the government won't be issuing the passports, and they will only issue guidelines and have the private sector produce them. And this is seen as a negative in the chat. And also other participants have made the point on how it's easier to trace and keep track of when a passport is digitalized. And finally, as I speak, there are new comments coming in, so apologies for the pause. But
we can probably even bring back at the end, if we have time, more of the comments. But I see the discussions are quite interesting. So I'll briefly ask Katarina if you have any tweet-like comments before I pass the floor to Jovan on this sort of digital versus paper one.
Well, the digital passports are faster, but they're not a universal solution. So that would be all.
That's the trend. Okay, moving on to Jovan, maybe Jovan, if you wish, a quick zoom out perspective from on all three trends and what's coming, and then we'll look into April. Jovan.
Thank you, Vlada. I will just go into reverse order of points, starting with the third one on digital vaccination and lesson from COVID-19. In zoom out perspective, we should acknowledge that digital technology helps society to have business continuity when we faced the COVID pandemic in March last year. Sometimes it is overlooked, but it is important lesson learned that it was the sort of, it survived the digital technology survived this test. On the second point on the tech sovereignty, the key issue for us will be to what extent states are ready to decouple themselves from the internet. Now we are hearing the news from all corners, from the United States, China, Europe, that it's not anymore unthinkable not to have integrated internet. It comes in different forms. But the key question is to what extent they are ready to decouple on the cable level, on standard level, of DNS level, on the data level, on the level of applications. Can use a Facebook, Twitter, WeChat all over the world. And this will be the key discussion, because then we will see what level of integration we can preserve. Obviously, for society, it would be great that we have integrated internet, but we should be aware and ready for the certain level of decoupling. And this is a reality which is happening around us. And the comment on the first point on the cybersecurity, and by the way, an excellent discussion with Ambassador Lauber, is that we need some sort of constructive reflections and journalism. We were shocked by the news that no major international agency, Reuters, on the national agency, reported on this development. And we analyzed the media coverage over the last 3 months on cybersecurity. What media is interested in is basically to report on scandals, problems, major failures, to have the click bites as strong as it is possible. There is a need for the constructive journalism. It shouldn't be utopian, it shouldn't be naively positive, but it should also reflect on positive developments. And this is missing, and if we have colleagues from media in the audience today, it is a big call to act and to raise to your responsibility to inform the public properly, not only to increase, to look for to follow these news, which are probably media-wise sexier of the incidents, but also to report on the important developments. Those would be the three reflections in the reverse order, which may be zoom out views or additional angle to our discussion. Over to you.
Thank you, Jovan. Thank you for joining. We have to move on. The production and the team behind will kill us for breaking all the plans when it comes to timing, but it has been interesting to review what was in the previous one. Please continue in the chat as we go on. But before we move into what's coming in April, we wanted to check again, as some of the diplomats in some negotiations would say, the temperature of the room. So what is the main trend for all of you of this month? And as always, we open the Mentimeter, and you'll be able to simply cast your vote. So what you have to do is go to menti.com, and this way enter the code, and you'll get a simple question: what is the top trend of the month? And basically we have the three trends of the month that we mentioned: vaccines, tech sovereignty, and cybersecurity diplomacy negotiations. So go to Mentimeter, cast your vote, and we'll get back very soon with results where we are. I see some results already coming. But let's move on while you're voting. Let's move on to other developments which are important well, a couple of other developments from March which we missed, and moving on to April. So what also is important to mention in March, we measure this sort of a barometer in a way. What is the highest pressure when it comes to topics? Most of them we covered, But there is a particular topic which you haven't covered. You can certainly see the topics we covered. One is about e-commerce or internet economy, and there were a couple of related developments. One related to antitrust. The big tech is again under pressure, not only in the US and EU, now also in China. China has imposed fines and is set to step up the enforcement. The gig economy, we reported already on the UK's landmark judgment about the drivers, the Uber drivers. Now also we are seeing the steps at the EU level on improving the workers' rights for drivers and the couriers. And finally, taxation, which basically, despite of the OECD progress, the US has signaled that it will go forward with the OECD-led negotiations. The EU is set to propose its own digital tax by June. You can read more on all of that and many, many more details on the Digital Watch, so I won't go into details, certainly in a monthly newsletter as well. Let's get back to the poll and see where we are with the results. My guess would be that probably it is the cyber diplomacy, but in fact it is, I think, vaccine passport, which is the top trend. Quite interesting and quite important, and we'll certainly follow more on that. Let me see. This one is tech sovereignty is not as high. Thank you for your votes. Let's briefly see what's coming in April, and here I'll invite my colleague Andriana to join me so that we can take a quick look at what are the main events coming in April, what Diplo is offering. That's where we will also bring Marco in, and at the end you'll take us for a brief tour around the world on the regional developments. Andriana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vlado. It will be my pleasure. So the calendar of digital policy events is very rich, and I won't be able to enumerate all of them, but let me divert your attention to 3 of them. Tomorrow we have the Coalition for Digital Environmental Sustainability launch. This is a broader follow-up to the UN Secretary General's Digital Cooperation Roadmap, specifically the paragraph 10 of the roadmap, which notes that the digital revolution can be steered to combat climate change and advance global sustainability. Now, the coalition has set out some goals and some objectives, some values, but they are still subject to being changed upon reflections from the stakeholders. You can still subscribe to the mailing list, and you can still register for the event. At least it was possible this morning when I tried it out. And there are 2 events that I would like to divert your attention to, and these are events that happen each year. So the International Girls in ICT Day is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, and it will be on 22nd April this year. The ITU, which is, how do I say this, pushing forward this event, as always, is still inviting stakeholders to share their own events which are organized to celebrate this day. And a very similar setup is with the World Intellectual Property Day, which will be held on 26th April. Stakeholders can submit their events to be added to the calendar from April 18th to May 8th. Without further ado, I'd skip to the next segment of our briefing, and I would invite my colleague Marco Lotti from Geneva to tell us more what is Diplo and what is the GIP planning to do in April. Marco, over to you.
Thank you, Andriana. When it comes to our events, the first upcoming one is on the 6th of April. It's our web debate, as every month have the first Tuesday of the month a discussion on a just-in-time topic. This month will be on unpacking the EU's digital diplomacy and foreign policy. My colleagues can drop the link to the event registration page in the chat. This event is a follow-up also to our March conference 2021, the emergence of digital foreign policy with a specific European perspective. Then we will have our trade and finance tour, the one about digital economy. It's part of the 12 tours to navigate digital Geneva. As a follow-up to the Geneva Digital Atlas, giving an overview of who does what when it comes to digital in Geneva. As of January, the GAPS started thematic tours diving into specific digital policy issues. As a matter of fact, March was the month of standardization. We had yesterday a well-attended event. I will drop the link also in the chat. And the upcoming one will be on the digital economy. So every month we will guide you through a specific digital policy issue with a Geneva approach. And then on the 27th of April, we will have our next briefing, and following that, our digital policy and technology event, an historical journey. When it comes to the courses, March and April is usually a very, very busy month for Diplo Foundation. We will be launching, and the deadline for the application of the following courses is April the 5th. So those that are interested can still apply. The courses starting in May will be e-diplomacy, diplomacy of small states, advanced diploma in internet governance, 21st century diplomacy, with the new edition, cybersecurity diplomacy, whose deadline is the 1st of May. But regarding this last item, I will give the floor back to Vlada, who can tell us more about the starting of the cybersecurity course. Back to you.
Thank you, Marco. I'll be very brief. With the new cybersecurity course, well, many of you know that we have the regular online cybersecurity course, cybersecurity policy. It's much more overarching, covering the threats and the crime and the combating terrorism and cyber conflict, and as well as the national mechanisms and policies and such. This one is very focused on negotiations and everything that not only diplomats, but everyone who wants to follow the global cybersecurity negotiations, such as those within the Open Any Working Group, but there are many others happening in the WTO, in other relations to commerce, and within the CERTs on the global level, and so on. I would encourage anyone who wants to follow to subscribe. It's a shorter course, more intensive, but very interactive and in the group. And I'm passing the floor to Andriana for the round around the world. Andriana.
Thank you, Vlado. From Belgrade, we go to Asia, where we have Amrita Chowdhury waiting for us. Amrita will tell us about one trend in her region that was the most predominant one. And this month, it was China's tightening reins on big tech. Without any further ado, Amrita, over to you.
Welcome to the regional update from Asia for the month of March. I would be highlighting one policy trend. Concerned with the growing market power of big tech companies such as Alibaba, Tencent, ByteDance, etc., the Chinese government is coming down heavily on them, including tightening regulations. Steps to curb the growing power of big tech have been initiated since last December, when the Chinese regulator announced a probe into e-commerce giant Alibaba. Alibaba and Tencent-backed firms have been penalized for not seeking antitrust reviews for deals. Recently, China's market regulator fined 12 companies, including Baidu, Tencent, and Didi Chuxing, over 10 deals that violated anti-monopoly rules. Alibaba's UC browser, that claims to have more than 400 million active users, was taken off from the Chinese Android app stores for pushing advertisements by unqualified medical firms, for which UC later apologized. It is reported that the country's antitrust regulators are considering to levy a record fine on Alibaba Group over suspected anti-competitive practices. Overall, the existing government sentiment is that since the platform companies have grown too big, to avoid these companies from becoming monopolies and to protect rights of consumers, the government is forced to act. In that context, the State Administration of Market Regulation is expected to launch new rules this year to clarify the responsibility of platform companies involved in online transactions. It is believed that officials will adopt more powerful supervision methods and deploy a series of actions to clear up prominent problems in the online market. There would be more coming in the next few months, but that's all from me for this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Amrita, for sharing that reflection from your region. As you may have noticed, we have changed our system a bit this month, as in we do not have any more 2 short snapshots, but instead we have asked our regional curators to give us a trend from their region akin to the first part of the entire briefing. So let us know in the comments if you like our new system. And while you type that up, we are going to the Middle East and North Africa, where Hanan Boujemi is. Hanan will tell us more about the prevailing trend in her region, and that will be cybersecurity. Hanan, over to you.
And this is based on a survey of PwC, scanning through a number of CEOs of businesses in the Middle East, who stated that actually there is an increased threats when it comes to cybersecurity as an issue. So according to the survey, 59% of the CEOs in the MENA region aim to increase their investments in digital transformation in the next 3 years as a direct response to the impact of COVID-19. Obviously, there is a need to address cybersecurity threats vis-a-vis the business interests of these companies, and apparently resilience of the business is one of the prime concerns, and that's why more investments should go to preparing the infrastructure of these companies to be more cyber attack resilient. There is an urgency to do so, and there will be obviously more money and plans going towards having in place the necessary cybersecurity measures to make sure that businesses can actually cope with the current demand on everything digital. So that is pretty much a good news. I just think that the whole setup will obviously push more discussions towards having policy frameworks to tackle cybersecurity at various levels, at the government level and at the business level as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanan. And now we go to Grace Mutungu, who is waiting for us in Africa. Grace will tell us more about the internet access issues in the region. Over to you, Grace.
Welcome to Updates from Africa, March 2021, where we are highlighting the issue of internet access. And internet access has become a big deal, especially with the COVID pandemic, where a lot of activities are taking place online. And the International Finance Corporation this month put out a blog post arguing for commercialization of national fiber. Now, Africa has about 1.1 million kilometers of fiber, of which half or about half are owned by government. And IFC found that the fiber that is owned by government is underutilized compared to the fiber that is owned or operated by private actors. Hence the argument for commercialization. And speaking of private actors, Kenyan mobile network operator Safaricom this month announced the rollout of 5G, and it will be the first in East Africa to start rolling out 5G. And it is doing this in conjunction with Huawei and Nokia technologies. It will start in Nairobi in Western Kenya, which is close to the border with Uganda. And also still in Kenya, global peering company Afrix also announced a deal with a Mombasa-based IXP it's a peering deal, and this is meant, or this will see improvement of peering services around the East African region. And then a big announcement that was made by Pan-African telecommunications company, Liquid, is that they have completed a 2,600 kilometer high capacity cable that connects East to West Africa. The cable runs through Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, and on one hand, it goes through Zambia, Zimbabwe, down to Cape Town, and on the other hand to East Africa, then up to Egypt.
Thank you, Grace. And now we go to the last region for today, which will be Latin America and the Caribbean. Those of you who have followed our briefings before know that we used to cover only the Caribbean region, but now we have expanded the coverage. And we go to Ana Maria Correa, who will tell us more about 5G in the region. Ana, over to you.
Latin America and the Caribbean region, the main digital policy trend in the region in March concerns infrastructure and more specifically 5G related policies. In this regard, in Chile, the second Secretary of Telecommunication has publicly announced that the government is accelerating a plan to deploy 5G networks in most part of the country within 2 years. This 2-year deadline puts Chile well ahead of its neighbors in South America, and the government expects that would attract Amazon Web Services, given that Amazon is considering whether to install a data processing center in Chile or Argentina. Meanwhile, the Minister of Communications in Brazil announced in a public hearing at the Brazilian Congress that the country will have a hybrid 5G until 2028, when finally the 5G is expected to become fully operational in the country. This means that the 5G and the 4G networks will operate concurrently until 2028. This is all from my part. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Ana, and thanks to all the ladies for sharing the reflections from their own regions. Lara, over to you for the wrap-up.
Thank you for taking us around the trip around the globe. I think it was quite interesting, and we'll definitely continue with this in the next iterations. We have been a little bit through time, please apologize, but I think it was quite interesting, and I'm sure the chat discussions were equally interesting. Thank you for joining us today. A quick reminder, the monthly newsletter of the Digital Watch, of the GIP Digital Watch, will be available for the download at the Observatory at dig.watch in the next days. Another reminder again on the new course on cybersecurity diplomacy. You can visit on Diplo's website and link in the chat. And I thank you for participation today and see you again at the end of April, last Tuesday. That's 27th of April at the same time. Till then, stay safe. Bye-bye.